Before I start my sermon, let's be mindful for a moment that too often in Christian history, the Passion was read and the congregation was already in emotional uproar. And then some preacher stepped into the pulpit and fed the flames. And when he was done, they would rush out of the church and burn the synagogue. Martin Luther said this is a Mundhaus, a mouth house, where words are spoken, where the gospel is preached, where the gospel is heard. And Hawaiians say that words can kill because bad intentions travel on words and have a real impact in people's life and are destructive. So for all the sermons you will ever hear in your life, for all the times you read the Passion and the Bible, always remember that God does not need henchmen and God does not need judges. God needs people who love. Okay, our liturgical journey today is a roller coaster ride of emotions. We started with Jesus' triumphant entrance into Jerusalem, and at that point the crowds were excited. Jesus is here. And among the crowds there's a tangible feeling that finally something profoundly will change in this country. As it is, life in Israel is really hard. The country is under occupation. It's under occupation by the Romans, and the Romans are tough masters to have. They are absolutely convinced that their gods sent them out to rule the world. They bring the Pax Romana, which is peace, Roman style. It is basically the peace of the graveyard. In the eternal wisdom of their empire, it is that the dead always share the earth without much conflict. You can bury enemies right next to each other, on top of each other, in one grave, in two, or in 1,000, and you can be sure that no matter how you bury your enemies, the site will be tranquil and silent when you put the shovel away. In a graveyard, all dissent is absent. So, if you might think that Roman rule is not for you, that you should be independent and free, the steel of the legions will convince you otherwise. They will kill the dissenters until there is no one left who thinks that Roman rule is a bad idea. And that is what they call peace, the Pax Romana. Peace through strength. Peace through conquest, peace through death. But on the other hand, Roman rule does not just bring death. What Rome has to offer when you consent to your place in the Roman world order is this. You will be part of one of the most advanced civilizations this planet had ever seen until that point. It is a civilization with infrastructure, roads, bridges, with plumbing, culture, art, science, and worldwide trade routes from China to the British Isle. All Roman cities basically look alike, no matter whether they are in Britain or they're in Galilee. They are all variations of that one eternal city on the banks of the Tiber. The same architecture, the same government structure, social hierarchies, the same way of making life run its course. You can be part of the Roman world. You just have to give up what makes you distinct and what makes you different. And this process of cultural imperialism creates, for instance, Britons that don't paint themselves blue anymore and jump around naked in the groves of their holy trees, foaming from the mouth in religious frenzy. But as Rome integrates them into the empire, they wear neat tunics and nicely folded togas as they orderly gather on the Forum of Londinium and conduct their business in a very civilized way. And afterwards, they go to the bath, and when they're rich enough for dinner, they enjoy delicacies that Roman traders hold to the British Isles from the Horn of Africa or from the Caucasus. Rome assimilates cultures left and right like the Borg do in Star Trek. Resistance is futile. The Messiah in Israel, so the hope is, will change that. He will defeat this juggernaut that either kills you or that transforms you into an imperial clone. The people hope that Jesus will make the empire go away and that Jesus will restore God as a true king of the Holy Land. And their expectation is that Jesus is a warrior king who operates principally in the same way the legions do, just not with steel, but with divine intervention. But Jesus does not end up on the throne, but he ends up on a Roman cross. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, is enforced on him. He is crucified for sedition. And the guys that are crucified left and right from him are not thieves, as we traditionally say, in the sense that they are criminals who steal stuff. No, the Greeks says they are bandits, which means that they are rebels. They fight the empire, guerrilla style. And when they get caught, they get what all rebels get: a thorough lesson in the application of imperial power. The death on the cross is slow and painful and public. It's a display of what happens to you when the empire strikes back. Still, we have that image, we have that story, and we still talk about Jesus' victory. But Jesus' victory is not the victory that is dreamt up in human minds. Jesus' victory is much more profound and much more consequential. But even though our theology says that, we often stumble over the fact that the Romans win and that Jesus loses. We can't shake the feeling that winners should not die on the cross. We imagine triumph like Jesus takes the cross and hits Pilate over the head with it. But that's not how the story goes. So, we often ask ourselves, and they did way back then too, who did we follow? Is a so-called Messiah a pipe dream, an illusion, a charlatan, or a figment of our imagination? We cannot but frame our experience in terms of winning and losing, of dying and of survival. The dead have lost, and in this case means the empire has won. To us, winning often looks like the guys who nailed Jesus to the cross are dead and Jesus dances on their graves. But it's the other way around. There have been many victories in history. The Roman Empire came and went, was replaced by another empire, by states, nations, kingdoms, republics. History is full of winners, and when we think about them right now, we have no clue who most of those victors were, what they fought for, and what they did win. Most of the really great victors of history are now dead. When they were still alive, they helped to end one rule of some sort of government and usher in the rule of some other form of government. The baton of power was passed from one hand to the next, but in principle, nothing had really changed. Whatever they did, whatever they won, human life was still trapped in that short span between birth and death. Only Jesus broke the inescapable trajectory of life that moved from birth to death. Jesus was raised from the grave. And because he entered into eternal life, we have the hope to follow where Jesus went, as he was the first fruit of salvation. Is it significant that the empires got a point because they were the ones who killed him? What did they accomplish? The resurrected Jesus was more powerful and more compelling and far, far more dangerous than the poor itinerant preacher from Galilee ever was. Through killing him, the Romans turned the man Jesus into the Christ. But without Jesus' death, there would have been no resurrection. There are many views about what Jesus' death means, and the books that explain the minutiae of suffering and dying fill libraries. But as devastating as the remembrance of Jesus' suffering and death on the cross is, what gives us hope is not Jesus' death. What gives us hope is Jesus' resurrection. We all have to go through our Good Friday, through our valley of tears, eventually. But that is not the end of the road. Behind death follows the miracle of Easter. But imperfect as we are, we often get stuck where our gospel story ended today. What we experience right now is a cliffhanger. We have ridden an emotional roller coaster of hopes that ended in crushed dreams. But remember, we are Easter people. This journey ends with alleluias and not with tears. Christ lives. Christ is with us until the end of time. This is a victory of hope over reality. This hope sees us through the bitter days of life, and it sweetens our days of joy. And who wins what battle, when, where, that's just a sideshow. Amen.